So I remember not too long ago, I got a little bit of pushback on here from being slightly hesitant to just automatically crown Carson Beck the best quarterback in college football, to just anoint him that after one season, after a year where Georgia didn't make all that. A very, very, very good season for Carson Beck, especially with it being his first year as a starter. Now ESPN has put out an article where they are ranking the quarterbacks in college football based on tiers, ranking all 134 quarterback situations in college football. They put Georgia in tier 1. And, well, let's go back to this part. I was getting pushed back. Because Carson Beck projected to be possible Heisman candidate, right? He has the best Heisman odds as of right now, right over Quinn Ewers in college football. Georgia projected to be so good this year. Carson projected to be the number 1 quarterback in the draft next year. At least a very high chance to do that. Possible number 1 overall pick, right? According to all these year 2 early mocks, those things will change, but Carson most likely going to be a high-end pick in next year's NFL draft. And then you just kind of look at Georgia's team and you look around them. The offense is still stacked, even though they don't have a Bowers, even though they don't have a McConkey. They supplemented with a lot of talent, and they already had a lot of talent. You look around and you say, well, Carson's really good and this team could do it. ESPN is a little bit wishy-washy with the way that they're talking about. Well, not wishy-washy. They're pretty clear, actually. Hey, you might look at these tiers, this tier 1 list that includes Quinn Ewers, it includes Carson Beck, and I'm going to talk about the list in more detail in a second. And they say, you might be looking at these guys saying, really? Like, this group of players are the tier 1 quarterbacks? This is a step below from what we're used to. And I think that might be where my pushback has come from, because there has been so many high-level quarterbacks over the last few years in college football. And you think about just some of the Heisman winners and some of the college football playoff quarterbacks over the last few years, and all the talent that, honestly, the last 15 years, just the talented quarterbacks that we've seen in college football year in and year out. And this feels like a season where it's not quite up there, right? Like, there is a step below in talent level at that position, at least with what we've seen with our eyes. There isn't Caleb Williams and CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, these bona fide Heisman winners that had more than one really good season. Right, Tua Tagovailoa, Trevor Lawrence. I'm just naming some of the big names of the last few years. It doesn't quite seem like there's a guy like that in this year's college football, and I think that's where a lot of this is coming from. ESPN literally quite says it. You know what? And I'll give you a little bit of a piece of it right here. This is one thing that they said about Carson. Beck might be next year's number 1 overall pick, but he certainly wasn't the biggest talent on his own offense last year. Right? Obviously, discussing Brock Bowers in that. Well, this year, the thought is that he is going to be the biggest talent because of how good of an arm he has. Very accurate. Was a solid decision maker. Didn't throw a lot of interceptions. He's expected to take that next step forward this year. But, are they putting too much on Carson Beck? I don't think so. I think that when you look at the other tiers that they have, and I don't know if I'm allowed to bring it up, so I'm just going to try to verbally explain this to you. But they put about 4 or 5 in every tier, right? And it's him, Dylan Gabriel, Quinn Ewers, and Jalen Milroe in that first tier. And that's kind of the point. As you look at that and it's like, well, what was tier 1 last year? Tier 1 last year was Caleb Williams, Michael Penix Jr., right? Guys like that. Jaden Daniels. Heisman finalist, national championship, right? That's what you're getting out of, even just a year ago. And then you look at this like Jalen Milroe. Well, Jalen Milroe has a long way to go if he wants to be elite. And you look at Quinn Ewers, kind of view him in a similar light as Carson Beck. Very, very, very good. Is he going to take the next step up and be elite? Because I think both of them have elite traits, but maybe they're missing a piece of it or missing another piece of it. And then you get Dylan Gabriel, who is a college football journeyman and a long-tenured veteran in the sport. Part of why, obviously he's very good, but part of why he's able to be on a list like that is just because of all the experience. So I think that kind of goes to show you this first tier. Let's look at the rest of the tiers real quick. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post talking about quarterback tiers and Carson Beck. I definitely believe that he fits in that top tier. But I do acknowledge, hey, I don't know that this group of quarterbacks in college football quite as talented as what we've seen in recent years. And I actually just scrolled up on the article. They literally list out a lot of guys over the last few years. Stetson, and they throw Stetson in there, and Stetson was that. Stetson was a Heisman finalist. He was a guy that could make things happen with his arms and his legs, right? There's that piece of it that Carson doesn't necessarily have. You see Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Tua, Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, Deshaun Watson, Marcus Mariota. Quarterbacks, there's been almost at least one super elite quarterback in college football. And honestly, the expectation is now, well, which one of them is going to be that this year? Sometimes you don't always know that. This is what they said about Carson. Another thing, a notable stat for Carson that kind of separates him from the rest of the country, and I think that this is important. Beck versus ranked teams. 92.0 total QBR, 74% completion, 13 touchdowns, as opposed to just 2 interceptions. So what, he had about 24 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Well, only 2 of them against those really good teams, 10 yards an attempt. He went off against Kentucky, right? So you look at last year and you look at, oh, well, the cupcake schedule happened and Georgia, Carson looked slow last year. What are the reasons why we can really put him in the next tier? I've got a few of them. I've got Auburn second half. Even if it was a little bit of, hey, I'm just going to get the ball to my guy. He got the ball to his guy in Brock Bowers. He made a lot of very good throws in that second half. Made a lot of very good throws against Missouri and gutted out a win, right? I don't think he had a turnover in that game. Had a touchdown. Goes off against Kentucky. Goes off against Ole Miss. These teams that were supposed to contend with Georgia a little bit more than the other teams. Carson just had some of his best days. Goes up to Knoxville at Tennessee and just, I thought that was his best game, even if it wasn't his best statistical game. I just thought that was the best game of football I saw him play this past year. Was not good enough against Alabama, right? He was good, but not good enough against Alabama that day. In general, Kirby, the team, right, they just lost to Alabama, and it's what it is. They just weren't as good as Alabama that day. You look at the next tier. Arizona's Noah Fafita, Colorado's Shedeur Sanders, Kansas's Jalen Daniels, Miami's Cam Ward, Utah's Cam Rising. And it's just kind of like, right? I think that Shedeur gets a lot of NFL hype. Shedeur's going to get hype no matter what because his father is Dion, right? So Shedeur's going to get that natural attention and energy, and at this point he's a little bit more than just a football player. He's got some celebrity status to him, but he definitely has some star power. If you watch those Colorado games, there is that. Does he take this next step? And he's the exciting guy this year. Well, there's the other portion of it where it doesn't matter, and winning a championship is the biggest part. And then you see the next tier that they've got, and I would consider 2 of these guys maybe in the tier above, in tier 3. But their tier 3 is Memphis's quarterback, Missouri's Brady Cook, Ohio State's Will Howard, Ole Miss's Jackson Dart. Right, I think you can definitely put Jackson Dart up there, a little higher maybe. But I think as you just scroll further down this ESPN list, like you look at tier 5, Graham Hurts, Georgia Tech's Haynes King. Right, these are not bad quarterbacks, but there's been a little bit more talent in recent years, and more specifically at the top. I do think this is going to be a really interesting year for college football. And I think, look, the 3 quarterbacks that I kind of look towards, hey, I just think that they're going to have really, really good years. I think Carson will. I think Quinn Ewers is bound to have another year. The amount of talent that he has in coming back, I think that will be really good for his draft stock. I thought he needed to. I think that guys... and what's interesting to me is I don't see DJU anywhere on this list. Tier 5. They tiered him with Riley Leonard. See, this list doesn't make any sense because a lot of people would say, hey, Riley Leonard is what's going to help put Notre Dame over the top. So maybe not great. They got Dylan Raiola in tier 4. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about this list, guys. But I do know that Carson is a tier 1 quarterback. I hope that I cleared up maybe some confusion of my thoughts for you. But he will be one of college football's elites this year. It's just a matter of if it looks elite as some years past. Thanks for watching.